Incomplete form is an unofficial term within the Kamen Rider franchise, used to refer to the unfinished states of riders. These can be experimental prototypes or forms that haven't been fully realized. They usually appear when the user encounters glitches regarding energy or stamina, hasn't equipped all necessary items during transformation, or simply because they are prototypes with limited capabilities compared to the base form. So, right now, let's compile all of these incomplete forms. Note that in this list, I will only mention forms that appear after the rider has completed the transformation process. States that are simply the armor manifesting mid-transformation will not be counted. Now, let's get started.
Number 1. Kamen Rider Kuuga Growing Form. Growing form, also referred to by characters in the show as White Kuuga, is the first form of Kamen Rider Kuuga, featuring white armor and short horns. This is the form Godai Yusuke transformed into immediately after inheriting the Arkle Belt. According to the producers, the reason our big guy didn't turn into mighty form right from the start was that he wasn't truly ready, both in terms of will and fighting spirit. As a result, he could only transform into growing form, a primitive and incomplete state. Initially, the police department referred to this form as Unidentified Life Form Number 2. Later, they realized it belonged to the same entity as Unidentified Life Form Number 4, meaning Kuuga in mighty form and his other variations. Growing form stands 190 centimeters tall and weighs 90 kilograms. Although it doesn't show many specific abilities on screen, producers estimate this form is only about 1/3 to 1/2 as strong as mighty form. Kuuga's finishing move in this form is the growing kick, which once forced Yusuke to land it 3 times in a row just to take down a target. Additionally, if Kuuga is heavily injured or falls into a critical state, he will automatically revert to growing form and cannot switch to another form for 2 hours. However, for the Decade Worlds version of Kuuga, the horns of the growing form do not shrink.
Number 2. Kamen Rider Ryuki Blank Form. Blank form is the state of all riders in Kamen Rider Ryuki before they form a contract with a mirror monster. However, in the TV series, only Shinji was shown on screen in this form. Because he didn't have the backing of Drag Rider yet, the blank form armor is completely empty, with no crest or special identifying details. Physically, Ryuki blank form is 190 centimeters tall, weighs 90 kilograms, has a punching power of 2.5 tons, a kicking power of 5 tons, a max jump height of 10 meters, and runs 100 meters in 8 seconds. Despite being incredibly weak compared to base forms, blank form still possesses equipment to protect the user, such as armor made of metal advertised as hard as diamond and reinforced legs to minimize impact. Furthermore, the user is still encased in a special bioskin layer that allows them to survive in the mirror world for 9 minutes and 55 seconds. Blank form's visor still allows Ryuki to see targets clearly from 5 meters away, and includes thermal vision for dark environments. Notably, the user can still use advent cards, just as Shinji once summoned a plastic sword, made in China quality, via sword vent, and the result, as anyone who watched knows, was predictable.
Number 3. Kamen Rider Den-O Platform. This is Ryotaro's form when he uses the Rider Pass to transform without fusing with any Imagine, or in cases where the Imagine temporarily leave his body for some reason. For other riders in the series, this is just a pre-transformation state. But for Den-O, platform appears quite frequently, especially in the early parts of the series. However, Ryotaro almost never uses this form to fight, simply because it is quite weak. In exchange, when in platform, Ryotaro is 100% himself, as his mind is not dominated by any Imagine.
4. Kamen Rider Skull Crystal. This is the incomplete form of Kamen Rider Skull, first transformed into by Narumi Sokichi in 1999. At that time, he hadn't truly accepted becoming a Kamen Rider because Sokichi did not want to borrow the power of monsters. However, coerced by his partner Shroud, and more importantly, to save his own life, he was forced to undergo the transformation process even though he wasn't ready. The result was the birth of Skull Crystal. In terms of appearance, Skull Crystal is nearly identical to the complete skull, except the helmet is iridescent/crystal colored and lacks the signature crack pattern. Additionally, in this form, Sokichi does not wear his fedora hat. The hat is considered a personal touch, his own trademark once he became the official Kamen Rider Skull. According to the lore, Gaia memories in the Double/W series unleash power based on compatibility with the user, and Skull Crystal is the form taken when Sokichi had not yet reached a suitable state. Therefore, in Skull Crystal form, the rider's power is not fully unlocked and is naturally significantly weaker than the official form.
5. Kamen Rider Birth Prototype. True to its name, Birth Prototype, or Birth Proto, is the prototype version of Kamen Rider Birth developed by the Kogami Foundation. The main user of this form was Date Akira via the birth driver and Candroids before the finished birth system appeared on screen. Date wore the Birth Proto to help the Foundation perfect the birth system, though this was only mentioned in dialogue by President Kogami and not shown on screen. Additionally, Goto Shintaro also donned this armor in a few special situations. As an initial test model, Birth Prototype was used primarily for training or data collection. Thus, its armor is integrated with scientific sensors rather than combat weapons like the original, and its power is capped at 70%. The accompanying equipment is also very limited. It can only use the crane arm or breast cannon. Regarding specs, this form is 199 centimeters tall, weighs 92 kilograms, has a punching power of 3.5 tons, a kicking power of 8 tons, jumps 45 meters, and runs 100 meters in 5 seconds. Although the design is similar to the official version, the output of the armor parts is limited and it cannot attach as many armaments as the complete version.
Number 6. Kamen Rider Eternal Red Flare. As I mentioned earlier, Gaia memories have the ability to exert power depending on compatibility, and Eternal is the prime example. When Daido Katsumi, its true master, didn't use it, and it was instead inserted into a lost driver by Kazu Jun, the result was Kamen Rider Eternal Red Flare. Similar to Skull Crystal, the Red Flare version showed almost nothing significant in the movie, aside from a display of psychic power against opponents, which was likely Kazu Jun's own innate ability from being a Foundation X test subject, not part of Eternal's power set. Compared to the complete Eternal, the Red Flare form lacks the most important elements that make this rider infamous. It has no Eternal Robe, the thick cloak capable of resisting all forms of attacks from heat, cold, electricity, and physical damage. It doesn't even have the memory slots on the chest, arms, and thighs. To make matters worse, the version Kazu Jun used was just a test version, so it was unstable. Although created with the purpose of leading the other 25 memories, this bootleg version of Eternal had its features severely restricted compared to what it could offer its true master.
Number 7. Kamen Rider Snipe Shooting Gamer Level 1 Proto. In 2011, this was the form Hanaya Taiga used when he became the first person to participate in the gamer driver testing program, making him the first Kamen Rider in the world of X8. By combining the gamer driver with the Proto Bang Bang Shooting Gashat, Taiga transformed into Shooting Gamer Level 1, also known as Proto Snipe. Official information about this form's power isn't abundant, but basically all Level 1 forms in the X8 world weren't designed to fight bugsters directly, but mainly to separate the virus from the patient. Therefore, Proto Snipe's offensive capabilities are basic and not very outstanding. Not to mention, since this is a prototype version, every time the Proto Gashat is used, it erodes Taiga's stamina and mind. The more he used it, the more his fighting ability in this form declined. In general, this form and the tragedies Taiga had to endure are the cause of his grumpy, cold, and very tsundere personality later on.
Number 8. Kamen Rider Zero Drive. This form appeared only in the movie Super Movie War Genesis. The reason for its existence is that Shinosuke traveled back to the past, 10 years prior, a time when the shift cars and drive system were not yet complete. He was forced to fight using shift speed prototype. The result was that he became Zero Drive, an incomplete prototype version of Drive. Visually, Zero Drive looks quite similar to Kamen Rider Proto Drive, but has details closer to the official version. For example, some armor pieces are painted red, and the spoiler on the helmet is finished. However, chronologically, this is quite paradoxical, since Proto Drive appeared long after Zero Drive. Additionally, this form lacks the ability to change tires, tire exchange, and its power, according to producers, is roughly equivalent to Proto Drive. The finisher for this form is Zero Drop, considered a weaker version of the standard speed drop.
Number 9. Kamen Rider Oja Blank form. Shinji wasn't the only one to appear in blank form. Another character was also seen in this state. That is Kamen Rider Oja in the movie Episode Final. At that time, Oja's contract monster, Genocider, had been destroyed by Ryuga. According to the rules of the game, when a mirror monster gets wiped out, the rider also gets wiped out, literally. Asakura began to lose control, his body trembled and slowly disintegrated. Just then, he ran into Kamen Rider Fem, the opponent who had fought him fiercely shortly before. Having taken too much damage and reverted to blank form, the snake, Ouja, quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Although he tried to struggle and act ruthless as usual, meeting his maker was unavoidable. Overall, his blank form did a good job of portraying the utter helplessness and pain of facing an overwhelming new enemy like Ryuga.
Number 10. Transformed Toriyama. Appearing in Kamen Rider Hibiki, this is the incomplete form of Kamen Rider Toriyama before he was officially recognized as an Oni. Since this form appeared before Tomizo Toriyama chose the title Todoroki, nominally he wasn't yet Kamen Rider Todoroki. According to producers, this form is called Toriyama Henshin in Japanese, essentially Toriyama's transformation. This battlesuit was used during the period when Toriyama was still training under his master, Zenki. Essentially, it is no different from Todoroki's base form, except he lacks the Ongekishin, the official weapon, and instead uses a substitute called Zeroshiki, a prop intended only for decoration and training purposes. This implies that Toriyama at this time could not yet fully exploit the power of the Ongeki Gen. Notice that the wrists and ankles of this form also lacked the signature chords. Aside from these differences, this form is identical to Todoroki's base form with stats of 21.2 centimeters height, 157 kilograms weight, 30 tons punching power, 40 tons picking power, a max jump of 69 meters, and a 100-meter sprint in 5 seconds.
Number 11. Kamen Rider Heart Type Speed Wild Technic. Here is another incomplete state from the Drive series. After Brain synthesized all the data from the battles between Drive and the Roid moods, or more accurately, after Heart was revived, he was able to access Drive's power source through a new driver. However, because the data compilation process was rushed, the result was a hodgepodge version, a messy mix of Kamen Rider Drive's 3 base forms, Type Technic, Type Speed, and Type Wild. Even so, this form is still recognized as an official form of Kamen Rider Heart. As for power, it can be seen as a true glitchy version, to the point where its abilities are almost unusable, and it cannot fight within heavy acceleration.
Number 12. Kamen Rider Century Break. This is the incomplete form of Kamen Rider Century, appearing in the movie Kamen Rider Beyond Generations, when the father and son duo, Ryunosuke and Hideo Momose, were forced to transform without achieving harmony of will. They created an unstable variant named Century Break. The story goes that Hideo thought his father was like some star that abandoned the family for 50 years. But in reality, since 1971, Ryunosuke, a scientist, had betrayed the Shocker organization, was thrown into space by them, and accidentally traveled 100 years into the future. In 2071, he met George Karizaki, who knew his true identity and knew he was the host of the demon Diablo. George designed the cyclotron driver specifically to turn him into the Warrior Century, bearing the mission to save humanity. But because his physical body couldn't be transported back to the past, Ryunosuke could only merge with his son. And as mentioned, there were still many misunderstandings between father and son, leading to the initial transformation process failing to complete. However, even in this incomplete state, Century is still an extremely powerful rider with superior stats. This form has a punching power of 81.2 tons, kicking power of 52.1 tons, a jump height of 66.8 meters, and a max speed of 100 meters in 1.7 seconds. Century Break can accumulate cyclotron energy, or century atoms, to move at super speed and summon energy saw blades to attack. The biggest problem with this form is that the user falls into a berserk state during combat, causing Century Break to attack anyone in sight, including allies. The fighting style is purely instinctual and can be easily suppressed if the opponent has a proper strategy. Ultimately, the suit quickly overloads and is forced to disengage to vent energy, significantly limiting combat time.
Side stories and special cases. Aside from the 12 forms listed above, there are a few other special cases. Since the official producers do not count these as Kamen Rider forms, but they share many similarities with the forms listed above, I will summarize them here for reference in the video.
Number 13. Gills, short horn version. Similar to Kuuga's form, Kamen Rider Gills also has a state that manifests when he isn't mentally prepared or has suffered serious physical damage. At that time, survival instincts automatically trigger, forcing Ashihara to transform into Gills, but a version with shrunken horns to protect himself. This form appeared before he fully awakened his will and returned when he was getting thrashed by the L of the ground. However, this is not counted as a form of Gills. It's very likely that because this rider is entirely a biological body, the shrinking horns are just a temporary physiological state. Number 14. Kamen Rider Drive, type speed, no tire. Essentially, this form is Drive's base form, just without the tire installed or due to a glitch during the tire exchange process. In Drive's specific case, Shinosuke was once stuck in this form in the special episode Secret Mission Type High Speed. Additionally, if the user cannot access the Trodoran car but still transforms, they are equipped with this tireless armor for a short time before being rejected by the transformation process.
Number 15. Kamen Rider Ghost Transient Form. All transient forms in Kamen Rider Ghost are exactly like the case of Den-O platform. This is Takero's form when he transforms without being possessed by any soul, Parkagust. This state appears quite often in the series, but strangely, the Zukon, or Official Rider Dictionary, does not recognize it as a form of Kamen Rider Ghost. Well, if the producers say so, then that's how it is.
Number 16. Kamen Rider Proto Drive. Although, according to the lore, Proto Drive's transformation system is the predecessor to the Drive system, and the design shares many elements with Kamen Rider Drive, the Zukan counts Proto Drive as an independent Kamen Rider, not part of Kamen Rider Drive's form system. This form is not even considered a form of Kamen Rider Chaser, even though Drive and Chaser are essentially the same character. Number 17. Kamen Rider Zero Spectre. Although it is the predecessor version of Spectre, because the user is different, the producers do not count it in this rider's form system. Furthermore, just because a form has Proto or Zero in its name doesn't mean it's a prototype or incomplete form. It might just be that I like naming it that way. So I have finished summarizing the incomplete forms of the riders. If you find this video interesting and useful, don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you don't miss the next videos. For now, goodbye and see you again.